We look a little rough and we're gonna deal with it. Be quiet, don't say anything. Hey, hi, hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Jess and I'm here to talk about this book that has been, I don't know. I finished it and I was like, and the more I kept thinking about it, it made me angrier. And then reading reviews and I was like, I see other people have similar thoughts as me, or ooh, I didn't think about that like that. That's a great point. And like the longer, like I finished it, I gave it 3 stars and I'm like, no. And then the knowing that there's people, which is fine, reading is subjective, right? That are like, this is life-changing. I'm like, this is a life-changing book. Where? For whom? For why? And that's why I'm here to talk about it. The book is Why Do Fish Exist? No, Why Don't Fish Exist? Is that what it's called? Why Fish Don't Exist, A Story of Lost Love and the Hidden Order of Life by Lulu Miller. Now, I have a Patreon TBR jar, and last month I read, for July, I chose 4, and this one was the 4th one. It came in a little later, so I listened to it on audio. This one was recommended by Molly. Molly, I love you dearly. I don't know if you've read this book or not, because sometimes people recommend me things that they read, they think I would like. They maybe think I won't like, and they would like me to rant about it. They have not read it and want me to read it and my opinion on it. So while I wrote down the title and who recommended it, I don't remember the reason Molly recommended this to me. However, Molly, if you're seeing this, I still love you. We might have to fight. Anyway, so this isn't a book I normally would have chosen to read because it is categorized as a memoir, and I usually only read memoirs of people that are famous and like I have some interest in, or maybe like I've just heard about this person and their type of memoir is going to be something that I can relate to. Like I can think of Bad Fat Black Woman, incredible, one of my favorite memoirs ever, and another one, My Father's Daughter, or Not My Father's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. I'll put them up here. Great. And maybe I can't relate to everything, but those are 2 that I think of that like I didn't know a lot about them, or if anything about them, before hearing about those memoirs. So it's not like I only read celebrity memoirs. That's not what I'm saying. So this was in there. I picked it out and I was like, okay. Now, for not like you can take Goodreads too seriously, but it does say down here nonfiction, science, memoir, history, biography, memoir. Now, I wish I had seen that part, but I saw a story of loss, love, and the hidden order of life. So I'm like, okay, well, if this is going to be things about she's gone through and tying it into science, this could be interesting. And then of course I have heard about this before, and this is no shade because I love her channel, A Book Olive. I was like, oh yes, she had read this and raved about it. Okay, because I've read a lot of nonfiction that she has recommended and enjoyed. I will say for the most part I enjoyed the writing, although sometimes it does get a little she's a writer for NPR, and a lot of people noted it as a very like NPR-y, like quippy kind of writing. And I haven't read a lot from people from NPR, so I can't like speak on that, but there was like a very flowy, I don't dare to say purpley, but kind of, it was less flowery and more just like, sometimes it's like, all right, we get it. Like we get what you're trying to say, you've over described this. But for the most part, I will say I did enjoy that, and it's very short. I listened to it at 1.5 speed, so I think I started it in the morning, but going to the gym, I finished it the same day. I think it's totals 5 hours for an audiobook. So it's very easy to listen to. And maybe that is part of why people love it so much, and maybe her language and how she just decides to describe things and how you can get lost in the story. Maybe people overlook the story itself. That's all I can think of. Anyway, this is obviously going to be spoilers. I always feel weird saying spoilers for nonfiction, but this is going to go into specific things that are said in the book, how it is organized, and because that's my problem. My problem is the book itself, also how she organizes the story. So if you don't want that, then I would say if you're going to read it, come back. But you should stay because you watch this channel either Well, you probably watch it for numerous reasons, but you can watch the channel. There are some people I watch and we have very little overlap in books that we like. So maybe I like something, you're like, I'm not going to like it, or vice versa. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you right now that I do not recommend this book. Like if I was making a list of books that'll change your life, my top 100 nonfiction books I've read, this is not going to be on that list, okay? This is going to be on what books I do not recommend, books I recommend to my enemy kind of vibe, so you know. So Lulu Miller is the author, a white woman, and she starts out this story talking about this man who I had never heard of prior to this book. And sometimes that happens in stories where people like talk about somebody or cite something and like a quote, a book, and then they kind of move on. That's what I thought it was. No, we get this entire man's life story. So biography, memoir is a perfect example because I would say this is 60% biography of this man, David Starr Jordan, and maybe 20% memoir, 15% self-helpy kind of, and then maybe 5% general science, why fish don't exist. And that may be generous. But this is overwhelmingly a biography and a memoir second. So David Starr Jordan, who I had never heard of, is a taxonomist. That's, you know, maybe not his technical term, but that's the easiest way for me to describe it, who lived in like the 1800s. I think he died in like 1920s, 1930s, okay? I think her dad might have introduced him to her or like referenced him at one point. She does talk about a little about her childhood and growing up with her sisters, her parents, how her dad was, you know, kind of instilled in them that chaos will happen. Like no matter what, chaos is going to happen. And that could mean just regular plans not going the way you want, or a loved one dying, like that. Though that's the law of the universe. Chaos, you know, energy is always moving. It never dies. It goes everywhere. Chaos is bound to happen. Yada, yada, yada. Okay. So describes her dad, who seems like a very interesting man. Also, you know, there was a little bit of abuse there, but she doesn't really focus on that. So it's set up like talking about David Starr Jordan, who he was, then going back to his youth, what happened to him, that his family were these Puritan people, but he was always interested in the world, the stars, classification of things, flowers, and like, you know, whatever they belonged to. He was just very interested in like the natural world around him and kind of had to hide that from his parents, who were like, this is not efficient for your time. And then he like loses his brother. Did he die from war or something else? And you know, she talks about how that, you know, drove him, how people can get obsessive tendencies after severe loss or serious loss, whatever. And it's a little back and forth. So it's a lot about him, and she would like interject a little about herself. But what we get to what spurred her like basic obsession into David Starr Jordan and what made her go down all these rabbit holes of researching him, going to find his old journals, going back to like places that he studied or whatever, was that she I don't think she's like saying she never does anymore, but was suffering from suicidal ideation and did try to commit suicide. She lived, but those thoughts were still there. And she describes like after school, was it after high school or college? Anyway, she gets into a relationship with this man she calls a curly-haired man, and that felt like a refuge, like a great place, a good relationship. And then she, after, I forgot how long they were together, she is somewhere and ends up kissing a woman. And she tells him, and he's like, okay, well, if you can just do that, then, you know, you're not committed to this relationship, and they break up. So while I'm sure she had a lot of regret and pain for her choices, and that coupled with existing mental health issues is really can create a really hard mental place to be, because I don't want to dismiss that. When it said love and loss, I was like, oh, once she got with this man, I was like, uh-oh, what's gonna happen? He's gonna break her heart. Is he gonna die? Like, what's gonna happen? But you were the cheater, and he wouldn't take you back. So then she, obviously the mental, health issue, she's ruminating on this. She talks about how she like would send him emails on like trying to get back together, get him to give her another chance. And he was like, no. And so she looked to this man, David Starr Jordan. Okay. And we continue to go through his life and his accomplishments, and how even though he may have lost a brother, he he focuses and rallies and he persists and he does these things and he wants to know the order of the world and he wants to discover things, and he does. And then he gets a job and he's the youngest professor of something, and he gets married, and all these things are great. But then he unfortunately loses his wife, but he gets another wife who is an upgrade from his last wife. What? Why would we say that? I think that's very weird to categorize it as that. He was married to that first woman for 10 years. I think they were similar ages, and 2 years after her death, which is, valid for people to get remarried. He gets remarried to a woman who is like 21 and he's like 46, and she says an upgrade, and maybe she made that as a joke, or that she was saying that is what he would think, but that just felt weird. Okay. But she just kept framing these things as, lost a child, lost a wife. But he just persists and he keeps in pursuit of his dreams, because there's an instance that she talks about early on and comes back to it, where because he spends a lot of his life researching, finding and identifying new species of fish. And like classifying, that genus, order, family, species. I don't know. I'm not that sciencey, right? And all of these new fish that he's discovering. And at one point, I think there's an earthquake, because at this point he's in Stanford. And so he loses a lot of like research, and like the fish, and they drop out of their glasses, and that he was just, again, he persevered, and he was like, well, my little tags got destroyed, I'll sew them onto the fish. Like nothing can stop this man. And it really is, you just have to keep going and believe in yourself and positive thoughts and womp. Okay, we're 60% into this book at this point, and I'm honestly like, what's the point? But like, I had it on while I was at the gym, and I'm like, whatever, I'm listening. It's not hard listening, but I'm just like, why do I care? Like, why? She herself, in my opinion, is not interesting enough to warrant a memoir, and maybe that's why this was mostly biography, part memoir. And then I don't care about him either. I'm like, okay, that's great. I'm sure his what he found is very foundational and important for scientific discoveries of modern day, blah, blah, blah. But again, why do I care? I know you're like, Jessica, you just DNF it. Shut up. That's not the point here. So I'm just like, okay, what's the point? There are little mentions, like talking about his mentor. This man's named something Agassi. And how about, his thoughts about evolution and about race, and how he didn't think that, black people were essentially a different species, that they were lesser than, they were very childlike, of course, than white people. And although all these new things had come out about like evolution and all these different things, the scientific, in his time, he still was like, no, I believe this till his death. And that was like his mentor. Right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay. And then we get to Mr. David Starr Jordan, accomplished taxonomist, perseverance personified, who just wouldn't let life keep him down. He believed in peace. He didn't want war. Why, you ask? Because only the good people get sent to war. The good, healthy, fit people get sent to war. And what's left? What's left to procreate and continue the human race? Well, the riffraff, the unfit, the unwanted. Yes, David Starr Jordan, if you already didn't know, was a major eugenicist. Like, real big. Not just little. Okay? Something I take issue with in the review was that saying she uncovered some dark spots in his history. Dark spots! I'm gonna say that clouds everything. But I'm sure for some people that just looks like a dark spot, and an otherwise spotless resume of a man who was so crucial to science. Okay, well, I'm sure the father of gynecology, also crucial to science, but he experimented on black women without their consent, and without pain medication. So is that just a dark spot? No, motherfucker. This man really, like, there was a part, and I feel like it was in northern Italy. I don't remember how he got there, but there was like a small community where people who were disabled in varying ways lived there, but they were essentially thriving. Like, they had their own community of people, and he was like, oh no, this is gross. We cannot not allow this to go on. And he was a big proponent of the eugenics movement, which aided in thousands of women. Either they were deemed mentally incapable or physically disabled, black, any other non-white, okay, to be sterilized, again, against their will, a lot of times without their knowledge.
This is an excerpt from the California Academy of Sciences, and I just want to read this because having the audio, I don't know what place to go back to find these things. So Jordan authored many texts and presented on eugenics ideas. One of his most well-known texts that he would also speak on is The Human Harvest, a study of races through the survival of the unfit. Jordan believed that war promoted reverse selection and dysgenics for taking the best and brightest young men, in his eyes, out of the reproducing population when they are killed in combat. In The Human Harvest, he also described an Italian town called Aosta, where people of various disabilities are in community, as a veritable chamber of horrors, with creatures with less intelligence than the goose, less decency than the pig. He named animal pauperism as the result of unfit animals and people being allowed to reproduce, producing so-called degeneracy. Jordan supported the education of women, but for the purpose of them becoming educated enough to raise worthy children. Not only did Jordan believe in eugenics, but he took action toward enforcing its ideals. He served as one of the vice presidents at the first International Eugenics Congress in 1912 and was the president of the Eugenics Committee of the American Breeders Association. In 1909, California legalized forced sterilizations for people the state deemed unfit. While we cannot say whether Jordan directly worked towards passing the law, his promotion of eugenicist beliefs and sphere of influence undoubtedly affected the passing of the law. In 1928, Jordan served on the inaugural board of trustees of the Human Betterment Foundation, which campaigned from compulsory sterilization. The committee to rename Jordan Hall at Stanford University concluded Jordan was not just endorsing commonplace positions, that rather was a leader in moving society in the misguided direction of implementing eugenic policies.
This is like the basis for what they created, the basis for what then Nazi Germany took. America really just be Jim Crow. They just were really giving great examples out to other people. But this, like, he was literally a part of that. Of passing laws that deem whether someone can have children or not based on their mental capacity or what the government deems is that. And he was an advocate for peace because he thought the good, upstanding, qualified, fit, healthy people got sent to war and we were just left. What? Are you? I just to say this is a dark spot in his history is so disingenuous, and I do not like how she set up this whole story as like this man is the image of resilience and look at him, and if he stopped going we wouldn't have all these amazing discoveries, and so I'm at this crossroad in my life where I'm feeling down, so I'm gonna look into this. Because the way it read to me felt like, oh, I didn't figure out he was a eugenicist till after I got so deep in the research. When you go to his Wikipedia page and it's a couple things down. It's not that hard to find. It's not buried deep. And that's the big overarching, big, terrible, right? Many other terrible things about him, like covering up sexual assault at Stanford. There's his, speculated involvement in the murder of Jane Stanford. There was never been confirmed, but there's some weird behavior there and a weird way he acted around her death while she died while in Hawaii, and she thought she was being poisoned. There had already been an attempt to poison her, and she said that, like, I think someone has poisoned me again before she died. The local authorities there and their medical reporting saying like this is possible that she was poisoned, but he not a medical doctor, I don't believe so, not a coroner, granted these are different days, goes to Hawaii himself and decides like, oh no, she definitely just died she ate too much and she kind of had a heart attack. When the local doctors are like, that's not what happened. So it makes him look very suspicious. So this not just like this one thing, right? And even if that one thing, him being a raging eugenicist is enough. But he wasn't this, it's just that it's a regular experience, right? A lot of us will, especially the age of social media and celebrities talking and us just learning all these things, you can idolize someone and find out they are not who you thought they were, right? That they support these causes you don't believe in, that they're a raging whatever, okay? You find that out, it's very sad. So it's not like I'm like, oh, how dare you idolize someone, but you find this out and you still wrote the book as this, I'm going to set it up. He's this great man. Oh yes, but he did do this. And I'm not saying that she does not condemn that. However, like someone said, it feels too little too late. And for me, it wasn't condemnation enough, honey. Okay? It's still, because she still is like, and I just look back and I wonder at what part of his story did things go wrong? You mean a white man? I don't know. I don't know, because he and his brother consider themselves abolitionists, which is funny, but still were raging racist eugenicists, thought they were better than people. I'm not surprised. As a black woman, I am not surprised. So of course I see this as a white woman being, oh my God, what? I'm so surprised. Girl, what the up. So that annoyed me. And then again, so we get his whole life, we get all these scandals and different things, ways he contributed to science, and then she would slip little stories of herself in there. And it just felt like when she tried to relate something of his life to hers, it didn't feel organic, it felt really jumpy. I was like, oh yeah, again, you're here, this is memoir, that's weird. Like, because part of it is talking about her sexuality because she eventually marries a woman. But it's not discussed a lot. And I'm not saying people owe a discussion of how you came to terms with your sexuality, or why she cheated on her partner. Not that she cheated with a woman, that why she cheated on her partner at all. But as a memoir, especially, you're usually looking back and you're like, at this time, I was in this state of mind. This is how I was feeling. Now looking back on that, there's really not a lot of that. It's just like, here's these little inserts and like how I think to relate myself to David Starr Jordan. And so it just did not feel cohesive. It felt really, those parts felt kind of jarring because essentially I was like, okay, why are you talking about yourself in this biography of this person? So I just don't. And then we get literally, it's like the last chapter where why fish don't exist. And basically it's that with all the, I'm not going to explain this the best, but like the specific classifications, that all of fish do not just perfectly line up in a category together. Like some fish, like a salmon, may be more biologically closer to another type of animal than it is to a trout or something like that. So just saying fish, while that is just still wildly a term, isn't necessarily the truth because they're not all genetically, biologically linked as we once thought. And so then she says that, wow, this is the universe really saying, F you, David Starr Jordan, for being a eugenicist because now your research meant nothing. And someone's Goodreads review was like, that's not enough. Like, I haven't been to Stanford, and I know there was a statue of his mentor, Agassiz. So I don't know if there's anything of statues of him, but I think there's at least a library or a building named after him. His legacy still persists, obviously, in the scientific realm.
Okay, I did a Google, because that's what it's there for. And I found this from Stanford's website that says, Stanford will rename campus spaces named for David Starr Jordan and relocate statue depicting Louis Agassiz, who was his mentor. This is from October 7th of 2020. President Mark Tesser Levine and the Board of Trustees approved a campus committee's recommendation, both to remove Jordan's name from campus spaces and to take steps to make his multifaceted history better known. Stanford will also relocate a statue of Agassiz. The decision follows a review conducted this summer by a committee Faculty, staff, students, and alumni, the university's board of trustees, acting on a recommendation by President Tessier Levine, approved these steps, removing Jordan's name from Jordan Hall, current home of the Department of Psychology, Jordan Quad, and Jordan Modulars near Panama Street and Campus Drive West, and Jordan Way in the Stanford Medical Center area, relocating a statue of Agassi from Jordan Hall to a location where it can be given appropriate context, and developing an active effort to better explain the full range of Jordan's legacy and contributions, beginning with an informational plaque in Jordan Hall and extended to additional efforts such as historical displays and educational programming. These efforts have the goal of ensuring that Jordan's history is not removed from the Stanford campus, but rather more fully articulated in ways that cannot be achieved simply by a building name. So, and they go on to say he has a multifaceted legacy. So again, the whole fish classification thing doesn't strip away anything from that man.
And people were like, what he discovered and the classifications and stuff was still important to get to this point. So it's not like that being a recent discovery negates everything that he did. So it's not some big fuck you in the universe. And that's again why I'm like, I don't feel like you condemned his harmful ass, not even just thoughts, things he actively did and participated in, and the results of that enough. You were like, oh, wow. He did do a little bad, and wow, now fish don't exist. That really got him. This man, and so with it, I'm like, what's life-changing? That he went through hardships and he got back up and kept going and pursuing his dreams. Okay, he also was a white man in America. I don't think there was a lot working against him. Yes, it's sad that he lost his wife and he lost children and stuff like that, and the earthquake coming down and whatever to his research. But I'm sorry, that's a regular story for a white person in America. This is not motivational. And again, I felt like she would throw in some kind of like self-helpy language about like believing. Because at first, I'll say, the thing I could take away from it is that at first, I don't know if it was her father said it or Starr Jordan said it, was saying basically like, we don't matter. We're these tiny specks on this one little planet in the universe. And then towards the end, it's like, we do matter. Individuals' lives, how they affect other people, like we do matter. Okay, yes, great. But I don't understand what's life-changing about this. She cheated on her partner, got obsessed with this man who was a terrible person, discovered he was a terrible person, was like, oh darn, that really sucks. And, eventually did find her longtime partner. I don't know what you find so inspirational in that. This was not someone who had even if it was a white woman in the 1800s, that would be more remarkable than a white man. A straight white man in the 1800s in America. Whoa! Not saying that what he contributed to science wasn't great. I'm sure, blah, 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 blah. Again, I don't care. But I'm like, this is not a story about a black woman in the 1800s coming into the scientific field and making all these discoveries and being credited for it, right? Like, and then she also adds at the end how a lot of, as he got older, I think from his use of, or how much he exposed himself to something, what was it called? The thing they use for embalming, whatever, that he wasn't able to do a lot of the work. So people that he didn't believe were real people, or he thought was less than, people who were of, Asian or Hispanic descent, were the ones actually doing the field work for him. And that they would be like in his journals, a little one-off about the Asian boy or whatever boy, but he never truly credited them. And I don't know how much it was him directing people and being like, you physically get that. But she said like in his later years that a lot of the physical work, the catching, tagging, all of these things weren't even done by him. But yet, of course, they can be good enough to do that work for you, but they are never on the same level as you. It is sick. So why fish don't exist? Shut the fuck up, Lulu. Terrible title. And this is a setup. So if you think you're going into some interesting like science memoir, don't waste your time. Unless for some reason you want to read a biography about David Starr Jordan narrated by this white woman. Then I guess have at it. But I feel like this was such... Why? Who published this? You know what? Publishing, duh, white woman, whoop, 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 de whoop. But I just am like, life-changing? Where? For who? For what? What inspired you? And it's hot. I'm gonna turn my fan back on. I done worked myself up. I feel the sweat dripping down my back, Lord. If you've read this, I would love to know your thoughts. But Also, did you know about David Starr Jordan? Again, I didn't. I'm not in the science world like that, so I didn't know. But yeah, rotten hell, dude. Kick rocks. Stay blessed. Hydrate, moisturize, and sunscreen. I'll see you in my next one. Bye.